The room was silent, too silent. Elena Laurent sat at the head of the long glass table, her fingers tightly clasped together, her expression unreadable. Around her, powerful men in expensive suits shifted in their chairs, avoiding her gaze like they already knew what was coming. Then the chairman leaned forward, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut through steel. "You have 3 months," he said. "Marry, or you lose control of the company." For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Elena blinked slowly, as if she hadn't heard him correctly. "Excuse me." "You heard me," another board member added. "Your father's clause is very clear. The CEO must demonstrate long-term personal stability. In his view, that meant marriage." A faint, bitter smile touched Elena's lips. "So I built this company for years, proved my capability in every possible way, and now I lose it because I'm not wearing a ring." "Not immediately," the chairman replied. "You have 90 days. 90 days. 3 months to find someone she could trust. 3 months to create a marriage convincing enough to satisfy people who were already waiting for her to fail." Elena slowly stood up, her heels echoing against the marble floor. "I won't let you take what I've earned," she said quietly. But as she walked out of that room, her mind was racing. Because for the first time in her life, she didn't have control. On the other side of the city, life was far from boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. Daniel Reyes stood in a crowded hospital corridor, staring at a bill he could barely read through the blur of his own exhaustion. His hands were rough, his clothes worn, and his eyes filled with a kind of quiet desperation no one noticed anymore. "Papa." He turned immediately. Sophia sat on the hospital bed, her small fingers clutching the blanket. "Will it hurt?" Daniel forced a smile, walking over and sitting beside her. He brushed her hair gently away from her face. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "The doctors are going to make everything better." She nodded, trusting him completely. That was the hardest part. Because he didn't know if he was lying. The surgery she needed was expensive, far beyond anything he could afford. He worked 2 jobs, barely slept, and sold nearly everything he owned, but it still wasn't enough. Later that night, as Sophia drifted to sleep, Daniel sat beside her and whispered, "I'll find a way. I promise." Even if he had no idea how. A week later, rain poured heavily over the city, turning the streets into rivers of blurred lights and reflections. Elena stood outside her car, frustration clear on her face. The engine had died, her phone battery was nearly gone, and her driver was nowhere nearby. For someone who controlled entire industries, it was an oddly helpless situation. Then she noticed him. Daniel. He was crouched beside an old car, helping an elderly man fix a tire. Rain soaked through his clothes, but he didn't seem to care. His focus was steady, his movements confident. Elena watched for a moment. There was something unusual about him. No rush, no calculation, no need to impress. Just genuine effort. She stepped closer. "You're good at that," she said. Daniel glanced up, slightly surprised. "Just helping out." He didn't recognize her. Didn't look at her the way most people did, with curiosity or greed. Just normal. For a brief moment, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Invisible. Finding him again wasn't difficult. Elena had resources most people couldn't imagine. A few calls, a little research, and suddenly she knew everything. Single father. 2 jobs. Daughter in critical condition. Desperate. Which made what she was about to do both logical and cruel. They sat across from each other in a small cafe. Daniel looked uncomfortable, his hands resting stiffly on the table. "I don't understand," he said. "Why me?" Elena didn't waste time. "I need a husband." Daniel blinked, thinking he'd misheard her. "I'm sorry, what?" "It's a contract," she continued calmly. 3 months. You marry me, attend events, maintain appearances. In return, I'll pay for your daughter's surgery. All of it." The words hung in the air. Heavy. Unreal. Daniel leaned back slightly, studying her face. "You investigated me. I needed to be sure. And you think I'd agree to something like this?" "I think you love your daughter," Elena said quietly. That hit. Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked away for a moment, trying to steady himself. "This is wrong," he muttered. "Yes," Elena admitted. "It is." Silence stretched between them. Daniel thought about Sophia, her small hand in his, her trust, her fear. "What are the rules?" he finally asked. The wedding was quick and private. To the outside world, it looked like a sudden romance between a powerful businesswoman and a humble, mysterious man. To them, it was paperwork. Signatures. An agreement. Daniel moved into Alina's penthouse, a place so large and pristine it didn't feel like a home. Glass walls overlooked the city, everything polished, everything perfect. And completely empty. At first, they barely spoke outside of necessity. Elena kept her distance, burying herself in work. Daniel stayed out of her way, focusing on Sophia. But slowly, things began to change. One evening, Elena walked into the kitchen and froze. Daniel was cooking. The smell filled the air, warm, simple, unfamiliar. "You don't have to do that," she said. He glanced at her. "I know." Sophia sat at the table, swinging her legs. "Papa makes the best food." Elena hesitated. Then, almost without thinking, she sat down. That night, for the first time in years, she ate with someone. Days passed. Then weeks. Elena started spending more time at home. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to. Sophia would pull her into little games, ask her to read stories, laugh at things Elena didn't fully understand but found herself enjoying anyway. "You're smiling," Daniel said one evening. Elena paused, as if she hadn't noticed. "I guess I am. You don't do that much," he added. She looked down. "I didn't have much reason to." Daniel leaned against the counter. "You don't need a reason." For someone who had spent her entire life being told what she had to be. That was a strange idea. One night, Sophia fell asleep on the couch, her head resting gently on Elena's lap. Elena didn't move, didn't dare. Daniel stood nearby, watching quietly. "She trusts you," he said. Elena's voice was soft. "I don't know why. Maybe she sees something you don't." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the contract didn't exist. But time didn't stop. The surgery date arrived. Everything was ready. Everything was paid for. Daniel stood beside Elena in the hospital hallway, his voice filled with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," she said. But there was something unspoken between them. Because once this was over, so were they. "What happens now?" Daniel asked one night. Elena stood by the window, looking out over the city lights. "We go back to our lives. That's simple. It was always meant to be." Daniel shook his head. "It doesn't feel that way anymore." Elena didn't respond, because she knew he was right. The night before the surgery, neither of them could sleep. They found each other in the hallway, both pretending they weren't waiting. "I'm scared," Daniel admitted. "She's going to be okay," Elena said. "That's not what I meant." He looked at her. "I'm scared of losing this." Her chest tightened. "This was never real," she said quietly. Daniel stepped closer. "Wasn't it?" She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. The surgery was successful. Sophia was safe, healthy, smiling again. It should have felt like victory. But Elena was packing her bags. Daniel stood in the doorway. "You're leaving." "Yes. You don't have to." She shook her head. "I do. This meant nothing to you." She looked at him, her eyes filled with something she had spent her entire life hiding. "It meant everything," she whispered. "And that's why I can't stay." Sophia ran toward her, tears streaming down her face. "Don't go." Elena knelt down, hugging her tightly. "I wish I could," she said softly. But she stood up anyway. And walked away. Weeks later, Elena sat once again in the same boardroom. Only this time, she looked different, stronger, but also, emptier. The doors opened. She looked up. And froze. Daniel walked in. Sophia beside him. "What are you doing here?" Elena asked, her voice barely steady. Daniel smiled faintly. "You forgot something." He walked toward her, stopped just a few steps away. "You said it was just a contract," he continued. "Maybe it started that way." He reached into his pocket, and pulled out the ring. "But I'm not here for a deal anymore." Elena's breath caught. "I'm here because I love you." Silence filled the room. And for the first time, Elena Laurent didn't think about control, or power, or consequences. She simply stepped forward, and chose him.